Fans, media, and the Washington Commanders all in agreement about where the team needs to build its roster as we exit the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or your Amazon Fire Stick. And we thank you for making us your first listen or your first view of the day. I am David Harrison, credentialed member of the media, covering your Commanders for Commander Country, a part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. You can find me on Twitter as well at dharrison82. An old name, but a new name on the list of potential sites for a new Washington Commanders stadium and winners from the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine coming up. But first, we're going to take a look at where the team's priority was in Indianapolis. It's where the team's priority should be this offseason, according to me, according to most of you. And obviously, the team is in agreement. They're spending most of the time looking at the offensive line, and according directly to an interview, or to an article rather, by Sam Fortier of the Washington Post, who was also on ground at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, the team met with no fewer than 19 offensive linemen in the formal interview portion of their weekend. So for those of you who don't know, teams have a lot of informal interviews with a lot of players, but then they get up to 45 formal interviews with NFL draft prospects at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. So the Washington Commanders choosing to use at least 19 of those 45 on offensive linemen is very, very significant. Not quite 50%, but when you look at the amount of positions you could talk to, you could be scouting there at the Combine. The fact that even that many, more than a third of their formal interviews went to offensive linemen is extremely significant, and hints at the fact that what we've all been talking about really all offseason, really all throughout the season, starting back with the re-injury of Chase Roulier and then the struggles on the offensive line, time in, time out. Trey Turner starting the season as a starter, eventually getting pulled, and then eventually put back in there. Sam Cosmi kind of doing what he could do, battling injury here and there, bouncing back and forth between right guard and right tackle, and then Charles Leno Jr., the veteran, trying to hold it down at left tackle. This offensive line's got to get better, and Ron Rivera did kind of mention that part of getting better on the offensive line is staying healthy, is having the same five guys out there as often as possible. That's a huge part of it. Well, when you've got some older players or some veteran players who can't stay healthy, the best thing to do is bring in some young guys who don't have serious injury histories and see if you can't keep them healthy to build that offensive line. So among the 19 formal interviews, this isn't all of them, but among the 19 were Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State, DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. So two tackles coming out of Ohio State. Interior offensive lineman O'Cyrus Torrence out of Florida. Center John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. Steve Avila, TCU is going to be a guard. Anton Harrison, tackle out of Oklahoma. Broderick Jones, tackle out of Georgia. Cody Mauch, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. Cody Mauch, a guy who can kind of play all over the place. And that's just, that's not even all 19. That's just a group of the guys that they talk to. But you already look there, some first-round names, some second-round names. O'Cyrus Torrence is a guy who stood out specifically during the Senior Bowl while we were in Mobile. John Michael Schmitz again. Steve Avila, if you listened to the mock draft Monday episode yesterday, you heard me multiple times call Steve Avila. That dude would not be upset to see him join the Washington Commanders through the NFL draft if that's the path that they went. But we do know even more guys that the Washington Commanders talked to, not just offensive linemen, some other position groups involved. And this isn't even all 45. That's, we didn't just go over all 19. Sam Fortier, again, Washington Post article, check that out. He drops all 19 of the names that he's talking about specifically, draw some interesting ties to what the Commanders like, to what Eric Bieniemy might like from his previous offensive stops, and kind of comparing some of these guys to some of those other guys. Really good stuff there from Sam Fortier. So make sure you go read that article and get all of those connections and kind of the entire breakdown of what Sam is talking about there. But we look at some of the other formal meetings that we know we kind of collected from reports and from talking to these guys at the Combine, where they say sometimes who they gave formal interviews, or who they had formal interviews with and who they didn't. Diane Henley, linebacker out of Washington State, cornerback Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State, cornerback Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. More on him in just a little bit. Running back Tajay Spears out of Tulane, one of my personal favorites. Tight end Darnell Washington out of Georgia, who was a feature part of our conversation on yesterday's episode as well. If you missed that, tight end Brenton Strange out of Penn State, safety Sidney Brown out of Illinois, and cornerback Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. So a lot of day one, day two guys in that batch. And you look at kind of the theme: offensive line, defensive back, tight end, safety, running back. Those are kind of the areas that the Washington Commanders are really starting to look at as they look at their draft strategy. Now, understand, right? So we've had situations in NFL drafts past. Washington's done it. A lot of other teams have done it where they may know pretty much everything they want about a guy, and they want to kind of keep him off everybody's radar, so they don't really talk to him in order to kind of keep the scent off of that player that they might be interested. So a lot of times they talk to some of these guys. Doesn't mean that they're 100% interested. It could just be they had some questions and they wanted to kind of get some answers about this guy. So don't take, a formal meeting with cornerback Joey Porter Jr. to be a public statement of we want that player necessarily. Sometimes they just have questions. They want to get those questions answered. And if they get the right answers, they go back to Brian Robinson Jr. They had a formal with him at last year's scouting combine, had some questions for him. They asked him. He answered them. They liked the answers. He ends up a Washington Commander. So we know some of the names of Washington talk to as they look for more rookies that are going to help the team win more games in 2023. But how many of those names won at the NFL Scouting Combine? We're going to talk about our list of winners from the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. That coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season has come and gone. We're in the final stretch towards the NBA playoffs, and now is a perfect time for you to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers, you get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained, rebounds, all of it. Plus, FanDuel even lets you build a combined bet for your chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Easily one of my favorite parts of using the app. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast first listen or your first view of the day. The Scouting Combine is complete, and that means we only have pro days as the next big circuit happening in NFL draft preparation. But we can't leave the NFL Scouting Combine behind yet without identifying some guys who made money for themselves in Indianapolis. Again, the three-pronged major NFL draft preparation cycle. Senior Bowl is kind of that first prong, which is why they have the slogan, the NFL draft starts in Mobile. Great event there. Obviously, the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, and then pro days happening all over the country, beginning very, very soon, even as the NFL enters the free agent window also coming up. I mean, the NFL's calendar is just crazy packed, stuff happening all the time. But again, we can't leave Indianapolis behind too quickly. We need to get some winners laid down here on the show, identify some guys. Some of these guys, the Washington Commanders confirmed, have already talked to. Some of them, maybe they have not, but they deserve their shout outs regardless. And we're going to start off, not necessarily 1, 2, 3, or like number one winner, but just three winners in general. We'll start off on the offense. And the first name I'm going to talk about, tight end Darnell Washington out of Georgia. And again, if you watch the Mock Draft Monday episode or listen to the Mock Draft Monday episode, you already know that I'm a real big fan of Darnell Washington, what he can do, what he could do in the National Football League for an offense like the Washington Commanders, inline type of guy. Not the most polished receiver in the world, coming out of the University of Georgia, but some coaching could help that. But in the meantime, he's a guy that could help out on your offensive line as needed, be a chip blocker, maybe a late release type of guy. Or if you need him, you can just keep him in line and help block almost like an extra tackle, but with more athleticism. Makes the defense play you a little bit more honestly. They can't just come out there. You put a left tackle or you put a swing tackle or right tackle out on the field as an eligible receiver. I mean, could you throw them the ball? Sure, you could. Penei Sewell for the Detroit Lions caught a pass last year. So, yeah, you could throw them the ball. But you put Darnell Washington out on the field, and the defense knows he could likely be getting the ball. So you're not necessarily tipping your hand one way or another. If you need max protect, you keep him in, and he can be serviceable protecting your quarterback, young quarterback named Sam Howell, who obviously you want to keep him upright as much as possible. But if you need him to go out as a receiver, fully capable of doing that too, and some more coaching will help him. You pair him out there with Logan Thomas or John Bates or whoever's healthy and whoever's available. If Cole Turner can take that next step, you put them both out there on the field together, and you got two guys that can certainly make an impact on the Washington Commanders offense as a rookie. So tight end Darnell Washington, maybe the catch of the entire NFL scouting combine. If you haven't seen the catch, literally just Google or go to Twitter and search, or go to YouTube and search probably Darnell Washington scouting combine catch, and it'll probably come up. It's pretty good stuff. Honorable mention goes out to Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion. I know some of you out there actually are big fans of Zach. Mentioned it in the comments on our Mock Draft Monday episode. So I want to give him a shout out. He did a lot of good things. There's a lot of unicorn material going on about him. So we'll see. Maybe the Washington Commanders decide to double dip into that tight end pool. So honorable mention goes out to that guy. Quarterback Anthony Richardson out of Florida. He's our next winner from the offensive side of things at the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. And I know Washington Commanders probably not going to go after him, even if he's there at 16, not going to draft him. Look, if he's there at 16, maybe you get a team to jump up that wants him. You trade back. They get a fifth year with Anthony Richardson, who's going to need a year or two to continue developing before he's really ready to take that step into being an NFL starting quarterback. You get yourself some more draft capital. So that's where it benefits the Washington Commanders. Is Anthony Richardson doing well? Now, look, there's already been some rumors that he might be a top 10 guy anyway, might not get out of the top 12. But look, if he's there at 16, for whatever reason, CJ Stroud kind of billed as the best quarterback at the combine this year. Bryce Young obviously is still there. Will Levis is still there. If there's a world where Anthony Richardson slides back to number 16, he showed enough of the scouting combine. He's going to show even more at his pro day. Maybe you get a team to give you some premium picks to move up, overpay a little bit to come get that quarterback. So the biggest thing really here is, look, he's not perfect, right? He still showed some mechanical flaws. The feet still aren't perfect, but they're improved than I think what you last saw when he was playing football for the Florida Gators. And that shows that not only is he coachable, but he's obviously capable and able to develop as a quarterback. That's going to give the teams who love him even more reason to love him. So him winning, while he may not become a Commander, certainly potentially sets the Commanders up. Because look, even if Anthony Richardson goes ahead of, say, Will Levis drops 16, maybe there's a team out there that loves him some Will Levis. They want to move up to nab him, all thanks to Anthony Richardson jumping ahead of him on some draft boards. So we'll see how it actually ends up and plays out. But Anthony Richardson certainly doing himself some favors out there at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. Final offensive winner from the NFL Scouting Combine, we're going to go at offensive lineman Cody Mauch. And this is another guy who did talk with the Washington Commanders, did have a formal North Dakota State offensive lineman. Came into the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile looking, had a little bit of reputation. Right? So people were kind of anticipating seeing him. Like, this is a guy who played tackle, but he could also play guard. Some talks. I mean, could he shift inside and learn how to snap? Probably, sure could. 5-position versatile type of offensive lineman, and he showed off at the Senior Bowl. I remember watching him in individuals. I don't think he lost a single rep. Go to teams, he's even better, playing smart, playing off of his teammates, helping his teammates, but also accepting help from his teammates. Everything you want to see in an offensive lineman, and he did it from the tackle position, did it from the guard, left side, right side. Really did not matter. Versatile guy, showed that same amount of versatility, athleticism, ability at the NFL Scouting Combine. Proved basically that what we saw at the Senior Bowl was not a fluke. It was not a 3-day window of just Cody Mauch doing well. In fact, it was who he is as a player. Me personally, I would be through the roof if the Washington Commanders got Cody Mauch onto their roster. I'm looking day 2. He might have worked himself in day 1. I don't know. There's a lot of talented offensive linemen in this group. So maybe he's still day 2 just because of the sheer traffic jam that sits up there at the top. But Cody Mauch, certainly a guy who made some money in Indianapolis, certainly a guy that I think any Washington Commanders fan would be happy to see land on this team's roster. Now we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. We went Anthony Richardson, a guy that maybe the Commanders aren't necessarily going to draft, but potentially his win could be the Commanders' win in some other ways. I'm going to go with another guy like that, cornerback Christian Gonzalez, Oregon Ducks defensive back. Look, a lot of early mocks had Christian Gonzalez mocked to Washington, number 16. I think a lot of people liked it. I think a lot of people liked it for obvious reasons. He's better than pick number 16. And that stock has kind of been growing and growing, and he's been rising, leading all the way up to the scouting combine. Then in Indianapolis, I mean, he was as tall as everybody thought he would be, as long as everybody thought he would be. He was faster than I think a lot of people expected him to be, and fluid as all get out, showed all the skills, all the transitions, the hips, the feet, all of it that you want in a number 1 cornerback in the National Football League. If Christian Gonzalez gets out of number 12, gets beyond number 12, I will be incredibly surprised So I don't think there's any way he gets to number 16. Now, how does that potentially benefit the Washington Commanders? Well, potentially you get a team, if Christian Gonzalez is there, potentially you get a team who doesn't necessarily want corner to trade out. A team who wants corner jumps ahead of you. Again, you're not going to get Christian Gonzalez, but if they jump ahead of you and pay some premium picks to do it, knock out a team who's in front of you and maybe doesn't want that cornerback, opens up some opportunities for you to maybe go get Devin Witherspoon, who we know the Washington Commanders met with, Joey Porter Jr., who we know the Washington Commanders met with. So again, potentially could also start a run. So potentially that moves him up. If that moves him up, it potentially moves other cornerbacks up. So that could actually hurt the Washington Commanders. Christian Gonzalez winning here. But again, regardless, you're going to have some really good talent sitting on the board at number 16. If you're dying for this team to get another cornerback at number 16, Christian Gonzalez win. Again, couldn't inspire a team to jump ahead and shift a guy out of the way who maybe wants offensive line or something like that. And hopefully they trade back to number 17 or later. But also, if you get that early run on corners, man, if Christian Gonzalez goes like 5 or 6, I mean, you might see Devin Witherspoon come off top 10, and then Joey Porter is next, and you got some other guys. We'll get to another guy that I think made some money in Indianapolis as well. So Christian Gonzalez, I don't see how he gets to Washington, but that does have the potential. There's a good and a dark side to that whole thing. The potential to impact the Washington Commanders certainly exists. Next winner on the defensive side, edge rusher Adetomiwa Adebawore out of Northwestern, 6'2", 282 pounds, running a 4.49 40. Look, I saw a USA Today article wrote about Adebawore. He said that his numbers were better than the numbers that Trayvon Walker put down in last year's combine. Trayvon Walker out of Georgia, number 1 overall pick, by the way. Adebawore is not going to become a number 1 overall pick, but look, if he's there day 2, Chase Young, I don't think they're picking up his 5th-year option. There's certainly some questions about his future health, his production before he even got injured. Certainly on the board, Montez Sweat's contract situation coming up, so they could certainly use an edge rusher. Adebawore is even front 4-3, even front type of edge rusher, but even if they move into an odd front, you talk about shifting in that 5-man front, you put him down there with John Allen, Deron Payne, Federi Mathis, certainly could get messy for opposing offenses. Final winner on the defense side of the ball, I mentioned another cornerback who may have moved himself into the back end of the day 1 conversation, especially if Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon can spark an early run on cornerbacks. That's Maryland cornerback Deonte Banks, ran a 4.35 40, was 2nd in the broad jump among cornerbacks and 1st in the vertical, showing some athletic and ability and burst. Maryland guy. I mean, look, some home cooking never hurt nobody, right? So Maryland Terrapins cornerback Deonte Banks, certainly a winner at the NFL Scouting Combine. That's going to wrap up our 6 winners. Again, tight end Darnell Washington of Georgia, Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson, North Dakota State offensive lineman Cody Mauch, Oregon corner Christian Gonzalez, Northwestern edge Adetomiwa Adebawore, and Maryland cornerback Deonte Banks. Could all be calling Washington home soon enough. The future path home could take Washington down familiar roads. More on that coming up today on this episode of Locked On Commanders. Could the Washington Commanders' new home be at the site of Washington's old home of the franchise after all? That question was kind of sparked by another report coming from Sam Fortier over the Washington Post. It's Sam Fortier Day here on Locked On Commanders. Sam doing a great job as always over there for the Washington Post. This is actually from earlier last week. Scouting combines getting wrapped up, kind of missed having the opportunity to really talk about this, but Sam Fortier reporting that Roger Goodell in early December told D.C. Mayor Muriel E. Bowser that the NFL supports her efforts to obtain the site of RFK Stadium from the federal government because he wants the district to be a part of the new stadium. Discussions even offered to provide lobbying assistance to the district, to Congress. And in the article, Fortier quotes an NFL spokesman saying, quote, "The league and Mayor Bowser agree that Washington, D.C. should be at the table when a new site is considered. We will continue to work with the mayor's office, the commanders, and Congress to that end, just like we are in contact with local officials in Maryland and Virginia as they review site and stadium options," end quote. Now, later in December, so this was early December, I think December 2nd is when Fortier reported, but later in December, when Congress revealed a spending proposal, the RFK site was not involved. Any cultivation of the RFK site was not involved in that spending proposal. Currently, the way that the stadium stands, Maryland has an offer I suppose, if you want to call it that, $400 million to improve the area surrounding FedEx Field currently, but also forbids any building of a new stadium in that proposal. So you would keep FedEx Field, just improve everything around it, probably do some renovations to FedEx Field. There are some renovations obviously already going on FedEx Field. Meanwhile, Virginia hasn't done anything since their stadium authority bill failed last summer. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin did propose a $500,000 study into luring the Commanders to the Commonwealth, but that has met with some opposition. We'll see what happens there. Of course, everybody expecting that the stadium talks are going to heat up once again once a sale is announced or finalized, which hopefully is going to be sooner rather than later. League meetings coming up at the end of March. So again, news on that could come up rather quickly. Do plan on being at the league meetings this year because there's going to be a new owner. That's where you want to be if you are a media member covering the Washington Commanders. Look, I think it's, again, it's not groundbreaking news. RFK Stadium is not going to get released to DC anytime soon for potential proposal to develop into a new site for the Washington Commanders. But I think it's important that Washington, D.C. be in this conversation. I go back to other teams that are called one team place, but they don't play in that place. It was like the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. I thought when that happened, that was kind of a weird situation. And I know not every single team necessarily plays in, the city that they're called. Sometimes they kind of play in the outskirts and all that stuff. But look, if we're gonna have an NFL franchise that the name says you're in the nation's capital, then it makes sense to try and pursue any venue you can to be in the nation's capital. Landover, Maryland, not the nation's capital. Commonwealth of Virginia, not the nation's capital. There's only one nation's capital. It's in D.C. That's where RFK is. So, again, if we can get, if it's possibility to make that happen, I think that is worth exploring. Not necessarily saying it's going to happen. Selfishly, personally, honestly, the Commonwealth is the best option for me, depending on where in the Commonwealth. If it's closer to Ashburn, that's closer to me. I live on the Ashburn side of Virginia. A lot of your media members, Sam 48 included, live on the other side of the Commonwealth, or even in Maryland in some cases. I'm sure in DC. So, selfishly, anything closer to Ashburn from Landover to Ashburn would be better for me personally, but this isn't about me personally. This is about the team. And again, if you're going to be the Washington Commanders, as close to Washington, if not in Washington, it just kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? So more on that, I'm sure, will heat up again as soon as new ownership details emerge, which there are rumors flying all over the place. We're not going to dive into every single rumor. Now, look, if you want to dive into a rumor, let me know. We'll dive into some rumors, but I'm trying to stick to facts, who the Washington Commanders are looking at, who they're meeting with, who they're talking with, who's talking about doing deals, who's not talking about doing deals. We'll continue talking about all of that here on Locked On Commanders. And we thank you again for making us your first view or your first listen of the day. Now make your second listener view the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez of the Draft Network provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you want in on the conversation, drop your comments on YouTube below or hit us up in email form at lockedonwashingtoncommanders@gmail.com, or preferably in the DMs on Twitter at LOCommanders or personally at DHarrison82. Signing off for today, I'm David Harrison, staff writer for Commander Country of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. Find me there or here or on Twitter again at DHarrison82. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. We'll see you next time right here for the next episode of Locked On Commanders.